Welcome to the Health Trip Podcast. My name is Jill Foose. I'm a functional medicine and integrative nutrition health coach. I created this podcast to bring you along as we travel down intriguing, science-packed roads, debunking old medical paradigms and perusing new innovative therapies and modalities with the finest functional medicine doctors, practitioners, and like-minded biohackers while living our best life. Enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Health Trip Podcast. I am coming up on a very special one-year anniversary. It's called my Healthy Hair Growth Anniversary. And in a couple weeks, it'll be 1 year since I turned things around for myself. And hopefully it's for good. I follow a very strict protocol and have discovered my unique health equation to supporting a lot of goals, but mostly my hair growth goals. So when I talk about hair loss, you'll often hear me talk about gut health, micronutrient deficiencies, genetics, getting deep dives into blood work done, making sure your diet is optimal, your stress management is optimal, your sleep is optimal, all the things to set up a healthy foundation to growing healthy hair. I don't often talk about scalp health, so I wanted to celebrate my 1 year anniversary with a very special guest today and talk about scalp health. Think of your scalp as the garden bed, the soil upon which healthy hair growth is made possible. Some people have dry or oily dandruff, eczema, psoriasis, or even scarring from alopecia. And all of that inhibits the way our hair grows. Most of us are confused about which hair products to buy, which to avoid, how often we should wash our hair, if certain hairstyles inhibit the way our hair grows. So to break this all down, I invited Karen Gordon onto the podcast. She is a certified trichologist and president of Karen Gordon Hair Loss Solutions. She is also the director of Cosmetology USA for the World Trichology Society. She created the Gordon method of hair and scalp analysis, which is now used by hair loss specialists across the country to help clients with thinning hair. As a leader in her field, she is a sought-after speaker on all issues pertaining to the hair and scalp. So I am very excited to deep dive into this topic with her. A little medical disclaimer before we get on. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice or for making any lifestyle changes to treat any medical condition, either yourself or others. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. And this entire disclaimer also applies to any of my guests on my podcast. So sit back, open your minds, and let's dive in with Karen. Hi, Karen. Welcome to the Health Trip Podcast. I am so happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Jill. It's my pleasure to be with you.
So we're here to talk about scalp health, and there is no one that I would turn to more than you. You are an expert in this field, and I wanted to know what started you to even go down this path of looking into scalp health and becoming a trichologist. What is a trichologist?
Well, first of all, a trichologist is a person who specializes in disorders of the hair and scalp. So it's a paramedical field. And people always ask me what got me into this profession. Most people who go into it have a personal story, a journey that they went through. Perhaps they had breast cancer or their hair fell out for whatever reason, and they decided they wanted to become a specialist in hair and scalp disorders. But my story is a little bit different. I'm a longtime hairdresser, salon owner for more than 4 decades, a hair colorist, in fact, and still am. And about 10, 15 years ago, I noticed that more and more of my clients were asking me questions about thinning hair. They said, hey, did you notice my ponytail is getting thinner? It looks to me like my part is getting wider. My hair doesn't have the luster that it used to have. And I really didn't have the answers. And these are people who I know and love. I've been doing their hair for, 10, 20, 30 years. And I thought, wow, I really felt sort of inadequate as a professional. And I sort of felt like, could you imagine being a tailor and knowing how to cut a cloth and make a design, but not knowing anything about the cloth that you're working on, or the wool, where it comes from? If you buy a beautiful Laurel Piana sweater, it comes from, the best animals and the highest altitudes and all the rest. And I thought, maybe I should learn and provide the answers for my clients, because so many of them were starting to ask. So I knew a little bit about the field of trichology and went online and saw that there was a conference in Washington, D.C., and signed up and went to it knowing absolutely nothing, and just fell in love with the field. And I said, next year I want to come back and be much more knowledgeable, and I want to be sitting at the big table with the big dogs because that's my nature. So that's kind of how I took it on.
Well, that's a great story. I love that journey because we don't really think about scalp health and conditions of scalp. I work with a lot of women who are also losing their hair, and it's, probably the last place we often look is, well, what's underneath the hood? What's going on? That's the root cause. And if you think about scalp health, it's the soil from which our healthy hair can grow. It's like gardening, right?
Well, that's
So,
the analogy that I use with people who I see in my practice. I say, think of your scalp as a forest and think of every hair as a tree. And you're born with every follicle you're ever going to have. I can't give you more follicles. But the whole idea is to create the best growing environment, the best soil, so you can have the longest, thickest, strongest hairs that you can possibly have, and to make your forest look denser. So get every tree a little bit wider so less sunshine gets in through it. So yes, it's a great analogy: plants, trees, soil, earth, all of that.
so let's talk about scalp health and why it is so important. What is its purpose? What's its role in terms of hair follicle health and growing healthy hair? Like, take us on the biochemistry path of what's going on in the scalp and the hair follicle.
Oh my gosh, that would take a long time to tell the whole story, but I think most
Give us the
people
cheat sheet.
I'll give you the cliff notes on
Yeah.
that. Every follicle is an organ. So we have a lot of mini organs that people don't even know about. And I think we don't treat that organ very well sometimes. And the follicle is where the hair grows from. And you have anywhere, depending upon hereditary factors and genetics, probably anywhere between 90,000 to 140,000 of these little mini organs, these follicles, embedded in your scalp. So it's a lot of little organs that need a lot of care and a lot of feeding. And we take very good care of our faces, particularly women with, expensive skincare products and good cleansing in the morning and moisturizing in the evening, but it sort of ends here. And, with the scalp, it's just an extension of our face. It's the skin. It functions like all other skin on our body does, as a protective barrier and to hold in all of our organs and everything else. But the hair from which it grows, hair has other value, like protecting us from UV rays, protecting us from environmental factors, preventing us from harm if we run into something. So it really serves a great purpose. And we just give it such little attention and we abuse it so badly. We would never think of not washing our face for a week. We would never think about using such poor products on our face or on the rest of our body, but we do that to our hair. So that's the value of the scalp, the importance of the scalp, and the purpose that it serves for us. And hair actually serves, from a social aspect, it's very interesting. I mean, very often it's an indication of status. It's an indication of sexuality. It's very deeply tied into our self-esteem and our confidence and many other things. So when something goes awry there, it really emotionally and psychologically can affect people at a very, very deep level.
Yeah, that's a great point, because during menopause is when I work with a lot of women who see the thinning and the progressive shedding. And it's just such a complicated time in our lives anyway, that now we have our hair changing, the texture of it, the volume of it, and it really does impact the way we feel about ourselves moving through this transitional period in our lives. So that's a great point that you just brought up. What are the most common scalp conditions and treatments that you've come across?
I treat a little more hair loss, but I also treat scalp conditions. But with scalp conditions, we very often I'll see people who have a hypersebaceous scalp, like a seborrheic dermatitis. I see people who have eczema. I see people who have psoriasis. But very often I see people who have what we call androgenetic alopecia, or female patterned hair loss, or male patterned hair loss. I try never to use the word balding. That's what I treat predominantly. I see a lot of people who have alopecia areata, like little spots on their head where they're losing hair. I see women who have issues called frontal fibrosing alopecia, and we see it more in postmenopausal women, Caucasian women, where the hairline starts to move back and maybe you get those individual single hairs. It's an absolutely devastating type of alopecia because the scarring is often permanent. In the African American community, we very often see something called CCCA, centrifugal alopecia. That's why they call it CCCA. It's a tough one. And I also work with people who have trichotillomania, who have a hair pulling disorder. So those are probably the most common things that I see in my practice. There's a whole host of other things and other medical conditions that people have, but that's predominantly what I see.
Well, let's talk about the dandruff because that does seem to be very common among so many people, especially younger people. I feel are going through episodes of more dandruff.
Right.
What is going on? What is sebum and what is going on when you do have dandruff?
Well, first let's differentiate, because I see a lot of people who come in and they don't know the difference between a dry dandruff and an oily dandruff. And they're two completely different things. So the first one is you can have a very dry scalp. It's not hydrated enough. The skin that naturally turns over, flakes off, and then you see it on your shoulders, especially on black clothing like this, you'll see it. But then you're talking about an oily dandruff, or very often a seborrheic dermatitis. And what happens is the sebum glands are in hyper mode. They produce too much oil. Very often, as you mentioned, in young people, it's hormonally related. It can be dietary related as well. And the sebum builds up on the scalp. It can create inflammation. It can clog the follicles. We know that bacteria feeds on the oil that's on the scalp. So it's very important to cleanse the scalp on a regular basis and try to get that oil under control. And there are hormones and DHT and other things that pass to the follicle through the sebum. So getting sebum under control is important. But we do see a lot of it in young people as their hormones are changing and changing rapidly.
And what about with autoimmune disease? So you see the psoriasis or the eczema. Do you see how that impacts scalp health?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we see the silvery scales, we see the excessive flaking, we see the plaque, the buildup. I can help those people, but sometimes I'll refer them to an MD. Sometimes they need help beyond what a trichologist is able to do, but it's actually quite devastating because particularly with people who have psoriasis, it can be hereditary, it is autoimmune, and often it's in other parts of the body. You know, they have it on their elbows, on their arms, on their trunk, you know, even on their derrieres, their legs. It can be quite devastating and very uncomfortable. People sometimes who have it on their arms, you know, in the summer, you'll see them, you know, completely covered up in long sleeves. It's a very, very difficult thing, but there are treatments for it today that are quite effective that can be administered. I can handle some of it at a smaller level, but when it's all over the body, then some of us need to see a doctor.
Yeah, but once they get it under control with proper medication and the proper diets, you know, following maybe an autoimmune protocol for their dietary needs, then they can come to you and work on more of the scalp health issue and regenerating that back to a healthy space.
Absolutely. And if they're starting with eczema or psoriasis, very often I can help them get it under control so it doesn't spread. But, you know, once it's spread all, you know, throughout the system and on other parts of the body, it becomes a little more complicated. But if they're starting to see it, very often people will see it around the ears, they'll see it around their neckline and the nape area. If it's still at that level, I'm very capable of doing things to help them so it won't spread further.
And so you still see hair growth happening after there's some healing time, correct? It's not it's not permanent damage.
No, it's not a scarring alopecia. No, you have to be careful though, because if you do permanent damage to the follicle, it could become a scarring alopecia. So it's really important to get under control, but typically it shouldn't be a scarring alopecia.
Okay.
So and alopecia means baldness or hair loss. So.
Right. So let's talk about how you assess scalp health. So someone comes to you, what are the tools that you use and why is it so important to start looking at scalp health when someone's on this journey? Why do you want to document it?
Well, we want a first baseline where people are at, and no pun intended, but we want to find the root cause. I mean, there are so many things going on. And my passion, you know, treating men is fairly easy. 95% of men who have thinning hair have male pattern baldness, also known as androgenetic alopecia. And for those who don't know what that means, androgenetic alopecia comes from the word androgens, which is hormones, genetic, which means it's inherited, and then alopecia, which is baldness or hair loss. So men are easy. 95% of them, it's the typical receding hairline, losing the hair on the crown, it goes back. But women are very, very complicated, and they have many, many factors that contribute to hair loss. They may also have androgenetic alopecia, but very often they've got low iron, they've got poor diet, they've got more stress in their lives. I'm sure you see it in your own practice. And it started trying to piece together the puzzle. So the tools that I use, I created a method of analysis. It's called the Gordon method of hair and scalp analysis. And I teach it to hair loss professionals across the country. And it's a system for inquiry to try to figure out what is going on with someone. So I put you through a whole host of questions regarding your family background, hereditary factors, your daily lifestyle, your nutrition, your medications, your hair and scalp routine. And it's a very, very thorough investigation that I do with that. And then I take a look at how much sebum you're producing. I have a device called a sebum meter because I like to measure how much oil is actually being produced by the scalp. Is it dry? Is it oily? It can be very deceptive, especially if people shampooed that day. You can't always tell what their scalp is like. I do a hydration test, and then I also do a pH test. So nothing hurts, and I don't cut any hair out. So that's the nice thing for people, because very often they're already afraid if they're losing their hair. And then I take a look at the scalp with a trichoscope, which is a very close-up microscope, and we photograph it as a baseline so we can see whether we're making progress or not making progress through treatment. And I look at this, it's kind of fun. That's my favorite part, actually, of the analysis, because we really never get to see our bodies that close up, that intimate. I mean, can you imagine looking at your scalp or any pore on your hand at 50
it's
times?
Actually quite frightening, actually.
Most people find it interesting. I've had a few people who are squeamish and can't look at it, but that tells us quite a bit. So I look at the scalp at 50 times magnification, 200 times magnification. I also look at it under a UV light, which lets me see just slightly underneath the top layer of the skin. And now I have a new cam, a trichoscope cam, where I'm very good at making my own analysis because I've been doing this for a long time. But I have another device now where I can send the pictures off to a lab, and they do all of the measurements for me that are very accurate. So we can see the diameter of the hair, the distance between the hairs, and we can record that and come back down the road after you're following a protocol and see if you're making progress. So that's pretty much what it entails. And then I create a customized plan to help you grow thicker, stronger, healthier hair, or to resolve whatever your scalp issue is.
Yeah, that's so interesting to look at the hair follicle under that microscope. You let me look into it one time with you.
I did.
And it was, it's really interesting because as we age, the thickness of our hair follicle diminishes, sort of like how our mitochondria declines in functionality and in number. The hair follicle just gets thinner over time. But you were saying, like, if someone goes on a protocol, they can actually reverse the thickness.
They can reverse the thickness, of course. Yeah, some people can, depending upon what the issue is. So the whole key is you want to get on it early. I mean,
Yes.
if you take, let's say you take a gentleman who has lost his hair and the scalp is shiny. I mean, this whole part is shiny. He has no hair. I'm not going to have much success with him.
Right.
So, but you take someone who is starting in the thinning process, a woman who maybe is perimenopausal, menopausal, and her hair is thinning. Yeah, I can help make those hairs thicker. And there are many different ways to go about doing it, but it really just depends upon what the issue is. And sometimes thin hair isn't due so much to a decrease in the follicle. It could be due to a dietary issue. It could be due to low iron. It could be due to a whole of medications that they're taking, a whole host of other things. So
yeah, part of the testing I do in my program is micronutrient testing and genetic testing, but it's that micronutrient test to see what those nutrient deficiencies are for each person. And there's always some commonalities when I'm working with someone who's having some hair loss. So zinc, magnesium, iron. So you start to see a pattern of nutrient deficiencies. Do
Vitamin
you,
D.
yeah, vitamin D is a big one. Do you look at these through testing, or do you send your clients out to get testing so that you can help them personalize supplementation as well?
I do. I'm not, I don't have a lab here to do the blood work, but I do send my clients to their doctor to
Yeah.
do a complete blood count, and I take a look at their results. They almost always bring the results to me and I take a look at them. The one thing, yeah, like you said, I always look at zinc, I look at magnesium, I look at all of the vitamins. The one that I pay special attention to that I think is missed quite a bit is ferritin, which is your iron
Yep.
storage. And ferritin, don't quote me on this, but ferritin has a very wide range. I think it's like
Yep.
23 to 232 or 323.
Mm-hmm.
So it's absolutely massive. So people come in all the time and like, yeah, my doctor said my ferritin is great. Nothing's wrong. I'm at 33 or 36.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine if you don't have hair loss, if you don't have
Right.
thinning hair. But the people who I train with and study with very often say you should be 70 or above. If you have
70 to 90 would be optimal for sure.
absolutely.
And that's what's really interesting about blood work is looking at these ranges. In the conventional medical healthcare model, the ranges are looking at the sickest of the sickest to the healthiest. And you're in that group, no matter what age or what health status you're in. But when we look at it from a more functional medicine approach, we look at more narrow or optimal ranges, and that can help determine how to move forward in someone's path in terms of personalizing their supplementation. So I think that's a really good point, is to, I can't tell you how many people I work with that bring their labs to me and their conventional doctor says, oh, everything looks fine. Meanwhile, they've gained 15 pounds, their hair is falling out, they can't sleep, they have more anxiety. So always important to work with someone who's looking on a root cause basis.
Yeah, and I love that. I would say no pun intended with root cause.
Right, for sure.
So.
And you're right. Women are so complicated, right? We have these hormones that the men have hormones too, right? But they don't have it in such an intricate way that women do. And both men and women experience a lot of stress in their life. And I actually want to move into talking about what factors create unfavorable scalp conditions. And one of mine on the list here is stress.
Well, stress creates cortisol, it creates inflammation in the system. I think we know inflammation is sort of the root of all evil when it comes to our health. And, I used to sort of brush it off every time you go to a doctor for anything. They always ask, are you under stress? Do you have stress? Of course I have stress. I'm human. I run a business. I have a full life. Of course I'm stressed out.
Right.
But stress really has a much larger impact than people know. I believe it was Time Magazine had a cover story article all about stress several years ago, and it was just most fascinating about what it does to us. So getting stress under control. And I don't mean to speak any less of men, because I love men, but women carry a huge load. Very often they're caring for the children, caring for an elderly parent, they're caring for their husband, they're working full time, they're making the meals, they're trying to, shuffle the kids back and forth between school and all of their activities. Of course, men have stress. They're the bread earners. They go through very much of what we go through, but I think women have a particular level of stress and they manifest it a little bit differently. And then you get everything that goes along with it. Then you get people who are on, anti-anxiety medications and antidepressants, and some of those can affect hair growth and hair loss. Then you get people who turn to, whether it's substance abuse or whether it's alcohol, and they're losing a lot of nutrients through that. So it just is this whole bundle, this whole puzzle that you have to put together. So, I do recommend to people, it's easier said than done, but try meditation, try yoga, try some time for yourself. Exercise is really good. If you need to, speak to a therapist.
Absolutely. Because when, I've been on my own hair growth journey for well over 25 years, ever since I had my children and had half my thyroid removed. It's just been a roller coaster ride for me. I have finally stabilized it as of a year ago. I'm actually coming up on my 1-year anniversary of healthy hair growth. So I'm really proud of myself. But it wasn't just about what could I do to help my scalp health and help my hair grow. It was many layers of lifestyle intervention and diet and supplementation. I was all in. And hair growth, as you know, takes a really long time to happen. And it is
I always tell people you have to be so incredibly
so
patient.
patient.
And sometimes it's expensive, and I understand that.
Yes.
Years ago, I probably shouldn't even say this, but I will. But years ago, I think a lot of it was seen as snake oil. But today, there's really good science
Yep.
driving it behind it. There are excellent products on the market. The people who are practitioners are fantastic. Every trichologist I know is very serious about what they do, and they study very hard. So, but the challenge with it is hair grows slowly. It grows about a half an inch a month. If you're healthy, a half an inch a
Right.
month. So let's say you go on a protocol and you get the right products and the supplements and everything else, and you're sitting there 3 months later and you're like, if you go, I usually say to my clients, if you want to lose weight, stop drinking for a week and do a few sit-ups, and your pants will be a little bit looser. I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot to start to flatten out and get some of the bloat out and all the rest of that. But with hair loss, you can be on it for 6 months and you're like,
Yeah.
what gives? And you have to be religious about it. You can't give up on it. You can't do the protocol, 1 day or 2 days a week and not do it the rest of the time. You really have to be religious if you want to see results. So it can be very frustrating for some people, but it can be highly, highly effective when done properly.
So I start with gut health, right? Everyone who comes to me with hair loss, I start with gut health, because if we don't have a healthy microbiome,
Absolutely.
we cannot digest and absorb and utilize the nutrients coming in. And if you're eating a healthy diet of whole foods and prioritizing that animal-based protein and those healthy fats, we want to utilize all the nutrients that we're shopping. We're spending a lot of money at the grocery store, especially these days. Now it's, the prices have gone up. Let's make the most of all of these bioavailable nutrients that we're bringing in, because that essentially is going to support our hair growth. So before you start going in and spending thousands of dollars on all these hair growth options, you got to get the lifestyle right. So let's talk about diet. Is there any optimal diet that you've seen work best when someone's starting to enter into that healthy hair growth path for themselves?
I very often will refer people to, I don't know if you follow her, how you feel about her, Dr. Amy Myers. I like her quite a bit. She's a New York Times bestseller. Very often people, if I sense that they have any form of inflammation going on, I believe she has an anti-inflammatory diet and an anti-inflammatory cookbook. So I like an anti-inflammatory diet. I think a Mediterranean diet is quite good. I think a healthy, well-balanced diet with a good amount of protein in it is best. I don't think people have to go too crazy. If people are hypersebaceous, then of course we try to get them off of fried foods and milks and things like that. But just a good balanced diet. Where I find people run into problems is when they have good intentions, but they don't know what they're doing. Like they suddenly become a vegan, but they really don't know how to eat properly, and they really don't know how to take in enough protein. And hair is compromise. It's mostly protein, about 85% protein. So you've got to take in a lot of protein to feed all of those follicles and to nurture the growth. And then if you don't take in enough protein, your body's very smart. It's going to send all of the proteins and nutrients to your vital organs before it goes to your hair and to your nails. I mean, you can live without a good head of hair, but you're not going to live very well without your heart or your brain or your liver, all the rest of that. So I usually say a well-balanced diet with protein, but be very smart about what you're taking in. And if you go on any kind of a restricted diet, make sure you know what you're doing before you do the restrictions.
Yeah, well said. A few years ago, more than a few years ago at this point, I went on a carnivore diet. I was always I moved from paleo to keto and landed on carnivore. And I was hardcore carnivore for 2 years. Now I'm very animal based. But when I was carnivore, I felt so optimized. That was the beginning of my hair really turning a corner, and I wasn't seeing as much shedding as I was before. And obviously it was all the protein. And so now, of course, I'm always prioritizing protein, always supporting my clients to increase their protein intake. And women especially never eat enough protein.
They don't. And people have, it's interesting because when I do my consultation with my clients, they might be eating right, but they might not be eating enough. Like,
Yep.
yes, for dinner they have, good protein, vegetables, their greens, everything else going on, but they don't do well at breakfast and they don't do well at lunch, and it's really
Right.
not enough to feed the body throughout the day. I remember many years ago, I was doing a photo shoot for a hair company, and we were doing the model call, and we weren't working with wigs. We wanted to work with all natural hair. And the models came in absolutely beautiful, stunning girls, but their hair was so bad, so bad,
Mm,
so thin, so limp, sort of eating away at the hairline. And I thought, what is this all about? But they're so thin. They were
yep.
very young, very, very thin. And when you talk about nutrients and how important it is, we see people with um, gastrointestinal issues, people with Crohn's disease, people with
Yep.
other issues where they don't, irritable bowel syndrome, where they're not getting enough
Yep.
intake of whatever they're eating. So yeah, your nutrients are so important in how your body processes them.
Yep. And that is why we start with gut health for
Yeah.
sure.
I
Yep.
love that. I love that. Do you recommend probiotics for people?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, I like them to be on a probiotic. And if they, if they aren't, I do work with a lot of carnivores. So eating from the plant-based world is not an option for them. They really want to stay carnivore. But for myself, getting off the carnivore diet and including certain foods that have helped feed the good gut bacteria has really helped me. It's not for everybody, but
Mhm.
that's the whole point of figuring out and discovering what your unique health equation is. What is your nutrition supposed to look like? What are
Mhm.
your supplementations? And this is where gathering data comes in. Like you're gathering data on Scalp Health, sending your clients out to an MD to gather information about maybe their hormone, their thyroid, whatever's going on in their body biochemistry. And I like to look at the micronutrients and genetics. So I can really help carve out a path. And that's how I turned my hair loss around, was carving out that very personalized path of what is it that my body needs to thrive. And it doesn't always have to look the same. I don't think anyone has to be one way always. That we evolve, and as we correct deficiencies in our body, we are able to incorporate more and more options. And so that's the path that I've been on, and that's the
Mhm.
path that I help us support my clients on.
I
Let's
find it interesting that so many people have gone vegan, but
Yes.
it's fine if they can support it well, if they really know what
Yep.
the right proteins are. And we look today at very elite athletes like Serena Williams. We look at, I think, Djokovic. Tennis players are vegan. Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, Formula One race car driver. So a lot of athletes are turning in that direction. So you can be healthy, you can be strong, but they obviously work with dietitians and people who
Yep.
help them make sure that they're taking in, the right amount of proteins and other nutrients that they need.
Yes, I do coach vegans, and I actually have a blog on my website about to be a vegan or not to be a vegan and how to be a proper vegan. And
That's
you're right.
how to be a proper vegan. I
How
love
to be
that.
and it's a very difficult and intentional lifestyle. You have
Hmm.
got to be on it every single day. It is not easy.
Hmm. I would agree with you.
Yeah.
So
Let's talk about environmental toxins and the impact they might have on, well, we know it has an impact on our gut health and our cellular health, but how does it impact our hair follicles?
well, everything that we take into our systems is going to affect our hair. I mean, it's blood that nourishes the hair. It provides the nutrients and the oxygen that feeds the follicle. I think, when I think about environmental health, I don't think so much that it's the external pollutants and chemicals that are affecting our hair, but what we're taking in through the food that we eat, and all of the chemicals and the hormones that are in the meat that we eat, and all the rest of that. That's where my greatest concerns are with that.
Yeah.
I would say try to eat as healthy of a diet as you can, when given a choice, buy the organic bananas over the ones that aren't organic, and just be very conscious of that. I mean, so many pesticides are out there, so many foods are fed with hormones and antibiotics. I don't believe any of that can be good for us, and consequently affect every aspect of our bodies.
And what about environmental toxins, or chemical toxins that would come in through what we put on our hair? Right. So we've been talking a lot about our diet and what we bring in, water bottle, stop drinking out of plastic water bottles, and all the foods that might have toxins on them. But what about what we're putting on our hair?
Yeah, I think, I always encourage people to look at lines that are a little bit more organic. They don't contain phthalates and some of the very harsh chemicals in them that can dry out the hair. I think some of them, I think people go a little bit too far, but I like to work with products that have more naturally derived ingredients, that have oils that are from good producers of oils, because you never know what you're putting on whatever you put on your body is going into your body. So I think you just have to be very, very careful about what you use. A lot of people I think are very concerned today. You get a shampoo bottle and it has the line through everything on it. Those are the things I recommend. If you can keep all the junk out, the better it is for your hair, because you don't really need all of those chemicals. You really don't need all of them.
There is just a sea. Like if you go on Amazon, there's a sea of hair growth shampoos and conditioners and masks and serums and oils. It's really overwhelming. And yes, a lot of them have the little logos that say no parabens, no sulfates, and on, but it's still very confusing. And we look at their ingredients and there's a lot of words that we can't pronounce or understand. So is there an app or anything that you suggest to the listeners to use that will help them really choose what's best for them?
There is one, and I can't remember the name of it, but there's a website that you can go to and look up all of the ingredients in cosmetics. I haven't been there for a while, but anything that's on any bottle in any cosmetic, you can go there and it'll tell you what the ingredient is and what it does. Not all parabens are bad. I mean, some of them are used as stabilizers, and not everything is bad, and sometimes I think we get a little too worried about what's in everything, but I think it's always good to be safe and good to check it out. But you know which lines are reputable, you know which ones aren't for the most part. I mean, lines that you've never heard of, that come from some far off place, I'd be a little skeptical of those. But there's a lot of really great products out there today. People are doing good work, and don't overestimate the ingredients either. Not even talking about parabens and sodium lauryl sulfates and things like that. But I think people give too much credit to certain ingredients that really don't do anything. Like coconut oil does not heal everything, and tea tree oil does not heal everything, and biotin does not heal issues with DHT and androgenetic hair loss. Yes, it can strengthen the hair, but too many people go for one ingredient like tea tree oil, and then they wonder, well, why is my hair still falling out? They'd recommended coconut oil. Why is my hair still falling out? Coconut oil isn't going to help you if you've got hair loss due to thyroid issues or due to a poor diet. So, you got to be really careful about what you're choosing to treat your problem with.
Well, what about when it comes to something like dandruff? Is there a specific or a couple of specific ingredients someone should be looking for?
Ketoconazole is quite good. Salicylic acid is quite good. Actually, some of the over-counter products are quite good for controlling initially dandruff, but it really doesn't do anything internal. So it might dry up your scalp a little bit, might get some of the bacteria off. But if you're having a chronic problem with dandruff, then I would recommend a certified trichologist or see your dermatologist. But initially it will dry it up, help take some of the flaking away, but it might just keep coming back. If it's a dietary issue or hormonal issue, no shampoo and no conditioner is going to treat that internally for you.
One of the phone apps I use is called Think Dirty. And it's actually a really good app because you can go on it and either search for a type of product that you're looking for body care or hair care, as we're talking about right now, or you can search for a specific product and look up. And it has a scale of green, safe, yellow, moderately harmful, and then red, which would be really harmful. And you'd be surprised. I turn my clients onto this app and I tell them, go around your house, not just for your hair care products, but everything. And just start your cleaning products, look at what's, in there and see what you need to start flushing out or use it all up and then start replacing with a healthier option. And one of the biggest culprits are fragrances.
Yeah,
fragrances.
I always encourage using products that have natural fragrances in them. Yeah, no artificial fragrances. People are very highly allergic to fragrances. They can create a lot of inflammation in the lungs, in the sinuses. And products that are fragrance free, they don't have to be fragrance free. It's usually a neutralized fragrance is what it is. But yeah, fragrances create a lot of issues. I know people who get migraines from fragrances. I have a girlfriend of mine who, when we go to dinner, has to send out an email that nobody can wear a fragrance, or she literally will be in migraine land within like 20 minutes.
I am the same way. And that is a genetic mutation or a genetic SNP, SNP. And that one usually is correlated with the MTHFR genetic SNP, which I'm homozygous for. And so that's why I test for genetics. I can do the tricho test, but I also like to look at other genetics too, because when I feel like when my clients see the data in black and white, they're more apt to make those lifestyle changes to help support everything that's going on in their life, whether it's weight loss or hair loss. Yeah. But I can't take Ubers or taxis anywhere because they always have that fragrance.
The little pine tree in the front.
Yes. Oh, my head is, I'm hanging out the window vomiting when I get in a car like that.
I don't have it that bad, but I have a little bit of it too. There's certain perfumes that I'm a migraine sufferer anyway, but there are certain perfumes where I just can't be, and I know which ones they are, near anyone who's wearing them, or I'm also in migraine land. I remember once being at the theater here in Chicago and sitting near a woman who was wearing that, and I had to leave.
Oh, I'm starting to actually get queasy just talking about it.
I am too. I know.
And I'm wearing green. Let's talk about hair care myths. There's a lot of myths floating around out there.
Yeah, there are. Those are some of my favorites.
Yeah, let's break them down. What do you got on your list?
Oh, a couple of things. People say you shouldn't wash your hair too often. Washing your hair more often is going to make your hair fall out. Having a clean scalp is really important. I mean, let's get the bacteria off. Let's keep our follicles nice and open and clear. I've got news for everybody. If your hair is coming out, it's coming out, and shampooing it isn't going to change a thing. Actually, it's a good thing, but here's what happens. People start to experience hair loss, and then let's say they're normally shampooing every other day, then they go down to 3 days a week, and we lose on average 50 to 100 hairs a day. So let's say you shampoo every day and you lose 100 hairs, and now you're freaking out because your ponytail is getting thinner, so you shampoo every third day, and now you have 300 hairs. Now you're even more freaked out. So then you don't shampoo except for every 5 days, and now you have 500 hairs that are coming out. So it just becomes this vicious cycle that goes on. So keep your scalp clean, shampoo as often as possible. You don't have to shampoo every day, but I think you should shampoo a couple times a week. And if you're a hypersebaceous person, if you've got seborrheic dermatitis or an oily dandruff, then yes, you should shampoo daily is fine. It's not going to.
And what if you're someone who, like myself, I work out, 6 days a week, so I'm sweating. So how is it important to get that sweat off your scalp?
It is. Shampoo every day, and especially if you're having any issues with DHT. And I've mentioned DHT before. Sometimes people don't understand it, so I'll try to be brief, but it's dihydrotestosterone. So men and women both have testosterone in their systems. Women just have less than men. And as we age, we have lower progesterone and estrogen, so we've got a higher level of testosterone. So testosterone goes through our veins, and it meets an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase, and it turns into something called DHT. So at the base of the hair follicle, there are receptors. And if you inherited receptors that are sensitive to DHT, the DHT just grabs onto it and it chokes the follicle. And the follicle gets thinner and thinner, and the hairs get thinner and thinner, and eventually they fall out. So that DHT is also carried through sebum. So if you're a person who's suffering from hair loss and the cause is DHT, male patterned hair loss, female patterned hair loss, and you're exercising all the time, you're going to want to get that sebum, that oil off of your scalp. And like I said, bacteria feeds on it. So definitely.
Okay, good. What about wearing a baseball cap or a cap every day?
No, they say it really doesn't have much of an effect. I mean, if you're wearing one that was strangling your scalp, you might have an issue, but most people don't. No, it shouldn't really do much.
And what about wearing your hair in a ponytail or in braids or barrettes, things like that?
I think you have to be really careful with that. There's something called traction alopecia, where the hair is being pulled out when it's too tight. If you wear your hair pulled back all the time and it's always pulling at the follicle, or if you're wearing braids that are too tight, you got to be careful of that. That can, over time, that can become a scarring alopecia. And once it's scarred over, the hair will not grow back. So be cautious of what you do.
Okay. Are there any myths that I've left out?
Oh, there's lots of myths. One of my favorite myths is people who use Rogaine or minoxidil believe that If they stop, they're going to be worse off than they were before. I hear this question all the time, and you're not going to be worse off. You're going to lose what you gained. But if you started on minoxidil when you're 30 and you go off of it at 40, you're not going to have the hair you had at 30. You're going to have the hair you would have as a 40-year-old you. So, but you will lose the initial. People also think that hair loss only comes from the mother side of the family. It comes from both the mother and the father side of the family today. So people are like, yeah, well, my mom didn't have hair loss. Well, could it come from your father's side as well? It comes from both sides today.
Yep. What are some of your favorite at-home hair care products? So we hear a lot about derma rolling, for example. And I actually had Dr. Bauman on my podcast a couple months ago. And I know that you know Dr. Bauman as well.
I do.
Yeah, he's awesome.
He is.
And
I'm actually a Bauman certified hair coach. He was one of my first teachers.
Right. And that's how I got to you, actually.
Yeah.
So derma rolling, you can buy these little derma rollers on Amazon, and a lot of people like to do them at home. But what happens is, it's that old saying, if something is good one time, doing it more is even better. And people get really fixated on derma rolling too much and too hard. And what Dr. Bauman explained on the podcast was that these needles can start getting dirty or cause infection to the scalp. And people probably shouldn't be doing these at home on their own.
I have to agree with him. I don't recommend derma rolling. If anybody wants to do anything, I prefer a dermal stamp, because the action of the rolling can actually pull at the skin and create more damage. So there are stamps that go straight down and aren't always doing sort of that raking, pulling at the skin. I'm not licensed to do derma rolling in the state of Illinois, so I can't do it on people. But if people want to try it, fine. I typically don't recommend it for the same reasons Dr. Bauman doesn't. I worry about the hygiene, the sanitation, and again, people don't always. It's one of those things that people can do too much, and then they create more damage, more harm than good with it. But I think it does have its place. I think if it's used properly, it can be effective in getting better penetration of some of the products into the different dermal layers. So,
what about hair massage brushes, exfoliators, massagers?
I think hair massage brushes, exfoliators, all of those are good. Hair massage brushes are excellent. You want to create good circulation. You want to create a loose scalp where the blood can flow well. All of those are terrific. It's the oxygen and the nutrients that is in our blood that nourishes the follicles. So I think they're all great. Of course, do you want to use these in the shower when you have conditioner on, or do you want to use them dry? You can do it either way. Doesn't matter. You can use them in the shower if that's easiest for you. If you put your conditioner on and you've got one, just make sure that the bristles aren't too hard. I like the ones that have like a slightly softer, flexible rubber bristle on it. Some of them are very hard plastic bristles, but if you want to massage your scalp with it and really get in there when you're exfoliating, just don't go too hard with it and make sure that the little bristles aren't too hard.
And is that something for every day or weekly?
You can use it every day. Yeah, you can use it every day. If you're washing every day, just be gentle with it. That's all.
And I know you and I are both huge fans of red light therapy. Caps.
I'm a huge fan of red light therapy. Sadly, I think it's one of the last things that people will invest in, but I think it's one of the first things they should invest in. Low-level laser light therapy has proven to be an effective form of treatment for growing thicker, stronger, healthier hair. Today, it's FDA approved. The devices are FDA approved. Laser caps, laser bands, I love. They work through a process called photobiostimulation, where they go down and stimulate regenerating cell growth, and huge fan of it. But they tend to be expensive, and you really have to go with a good quality one. If you're going with one that has very few diodes, you can be at it for a year. And one of the other things with red light therapy is you don't always know what the results are from it. It's very preventative. So you don't know what it necessarily always is doing, but they do work. And I love it.
Yeah. And as we're talking, this is a multi-layered approach to hair growth, right? It's gut health, it's diet, it's exercise,
Exactly.
it's managing your stress. It's working with someone like you to look at the health of your scalp and correct those deficiencies as well. And the red light therapy to me was a game changer. It made the slow hair growth process go so much faster for me and for my clients. And it is very expensive. There are lots of cheap ones available on Amazon. And like you're saying, when they don't have the diode strength, they're not really going to do too much. So it is a huge investment. But for me, it's a lifer. It's
It is,
something
and
that,
they're so easy to use. They're very
yeah,
quick. I mean, some of them, like a laser band, you can use just for 90 seconds, 3 times a
right.
week. The caps, you can go walking, you can wear them in your car as
Yep.
you're driving to work. They're super easy. But I think they're a very, very good investment. They tend to come with a good warranty. Go with a good company, go with a higher amount of diodes. But I think it's a form of therapy that people sort of get into last, but it's something the whole family can share if you clean it properly.
100%, right? We pass it around like a hot potato with everyone here.
Yeah.
So before we end, what are 3 top tips for you that you could share with the listeners of something they can do, of things they can do today without having an appointment with someone like you or signing up with someone like me? What can they do today to help manage their scalp health and healthy hair growth?
Yeah, I think really look at what your hair and scalp hygiene protocol is. Make sure that you're working with good quality products that have really great ingredients in it. So, if you're using drugstore brands that are no-name brands, I mean, toss those out. Use them as a body wash until you're done with them. I know it's hard for people to throw away things that they spent good money on, but really get into a good protocol for cleansing your hair and your scalp. I think the second thing I would recommend is really getting your diet in order. I mean, to your point, I think that's one of the most important things. It's what feeds everything that we have, and it feeds the hair as well. And I think third, I would say, if you're starting to notice a change, get on it right away. The sooner you get on it, the better the results will be. Once you start to lose follicles, follicles die. If you get scarring over them, it's so much harder to treat. So get on it immediately. If you want to just buy a laser band, great, start with that. But you really need to find out what the problem is. So laser band or laser cap isn't going to cure everything, but I recommend going in for a full analysis. If you want to start with your doctor and your blood work, fine. Of course, I'm a certified trichologist. I recommend seeing me because I'll do more comprehensive of a workup. But the sooner you get on it, and don't believe that there's nothing that can be done about it, because in most cases, something can be done about it.
Absolutely.
You've got to get on it right away.
Yep. How long does it take for a hair follicle to die? Like, how long of a wait period is too long for someone?
I think it just depends upon what the issue is and what the circumstances are. If you burnt it out through, let's say, a chemical relaxer, and you've scarred over the skin, that's going to be immediate. You're not going to have it. But let's say you've just got natural aging and you've got a lot of DHT, you've got androgenetic alopecia. It can take years and years and years. So
one more question I just thought of when you mentioned chemical products. What about hair color and those straightening chemicals that a lot of women use? Do those affect our hair loss?
I think for the most part, it tends to be an external factor, not an internal factor. I mean, people ask me all the time, can I continue to color my hair? My hair is thinning. I personally don't see that as an issue. I mean, if your hair is thinning because it's hereditary, I think throwing highlights in it or something like that isn't really going to change it. And actually might make it feel a little bit thicker because it roughs up the cuticle a little bit. I think you have to be careful of some of the relaxers that you're not burning the scalp or doing damage. There's certain communities, African-American community. I was watching a series on hair the other day with Tracy Ellen Ross, and they were talking about as young girls. They said, it wasn't working unless your scalp was burning. You want to make sure your scalp doesn't burn, because that's when you can create scarring. So that's not good. But that's an external factor that's being applied to the scalp. So
Okay, good. I feel so much better about getting my hair colored. Although I did a deep dive into hair color and found one that has very few, it doesn't have the parabens or the sulfates. It doesn't have the harsh chemicals. It doesn't last as long.
Right.
My salon here in Chicago brings it in just for me.
Oh,
And
good for them.
yep. And I have a little storage area in their salon and just Jill's products. And, it makes me feel better. I don't feel the tingling sensation on my scalp anymore when I get my hair colored.
Yeah, a lot of the hair color manufacturers are doing good work today in reducing the amount of ammonia and the other ingredients that people are concerned about, the paraphenyl and diamine and other things that are in hair colors, but they are getting much better. They're not perfect, but they're a lot better than they were 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. So where can people find you?
You can find me at Karen Gordon Hair Loss Solutions or www.KarenGordonHair.com. That's KarenGordon. I'm on Instagram, Karen Gordon Hair Loss. I'm on Facebook. So
Great. I will put all of your contact information in the show notes.
Jill.
And it's been such a pleasure to have you on talking about all things hair and healthy scalp. And you are definitely the go-to person when it comes to all of this. And do you work virtually as well, or just in person? I do work
virtually. Yeah, I have clients actually all around the country and in other countries as well. Now I do virtual appointments. I can't take a look at a trichoscope.
Right. I was going to say, how do you assess the scalp?
I'm pretty good at extrapolating information out of you through the questions that I ask. And then I have you send me pictures as well. And then I can send you, if there's someone in your community, some people can take pictures for me. I have a
great
trichologist. So,
okay, good to know. All right. Thanks again, Karen.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Lifestyle changes can be hard and overwhelming to make. By building your support team of functional medicine doctors, therapists, and health coaches, you can reach your optimal health goals. Be sure to check out my other podcasts. Until we meet again, stay healthy.